The 90s, the decade best known as the failed sequel to the 80s. But it did have its own unique moments that we still vaguely remember. The start of the grunge rock singer Tontine that was ultimately won by Eddie Vedder. The blazing train wreck that TSR became. Gen X earning its reputation for bitterness by constantly having to retrain due to rapid technological advancements. And who could forget Gwyneth Paltrow stealing Winona Ryder's Oscar by backstabbing her for the lead in Shakespeare in Love, thanks to Harvey Weinstein, thus securing Gwyneth's place in the lowest level of hell alongside other traitors like Brutus, Cassius, Judas, and Mike Fiers. But more than anything else, the 90s was the decade of the teen super teams, including the new Teen Titans, New Warriors, and of course the Power Rangers. Which brings us to a long-delayed entry in this series, Cybergeneration. Welcome to Night City, I'm Mr. Welch, and did anybody really like grunge? Be honest with yourself, we gave up 80s thrash metal for grunge. That's not a step forward. Cybergeneration was originally written in 1993 in an alternate timeline where a release of a nanotech weapon caused the Carbon Plague, which killed adults but altered teenagers, giving them cyber-based superpowers. This was not a standalone game, it still used all of the stat skill systems that Cyberpunk was famous for. You needed the core Cyberpunk 2020 book to play Cybergeneration First Edition. This changed 2 years later with the release of Cybergeneration Second Generation, which presented a modified version of the mechanics and one that wasn't quite as deadly and a lot more cleaned up. The first thing you will notice about Cybergeneration is that you're playing kids. This game has you starting at 12 to 18 years old, though there are some optional rules for playing adults. But why are you playing adults in a game that's based around playing superpowered teenagers? And just remember that only kids get to be cyber-evolved, or one of the changed. Those terms are interchangeable. Combat is not as lethal as compared to 2020, but that's mainly from them cleaning up the rules to remove certain overpowered elements like multiple attacks a turn with the vaguely worded extra actions. They didn't make the game less deadly, but they did take out a lot of the cheese, which cleans up the rules and removes some of the more ridiculous options. Like I said, Cybergeneration is an alternate timeline, with the government slowly integrating with the corporations to become a single entity. There is no in-USA here, it's the Incorporated States of America. The game gets rid of a lot of the gray areas of Cyberpunk. There are very much good guys and bad guys here. Corporations have bought entire states. The current president rules over the US with an iron fist, using the assassination of his predecessor as a grounds to do so. I'm not saying President Wyndham had something to do with the missile-assisted death by natural causes of President Hastings. I'm just saying his impromptu speech he gave moments after the accident sounded rather rehearsed. The old guard of edgerunners are gone. The government came down on them like a hammer. The only survivors are now middle-aged, but very good at what they do. Skip ahead to the distant future of 2025, the most important year in this timeline. Hey, that's today. On December 19th of this year, an AV carrying medical supplies in Night City will crash, and the helpful nanotech devices on board escape and start rewriting everyone's DNA. For adults, this is instantly lethal, as bad things happen when our DNA starts getting moved around like a game of 52 pickup. But kids, they haven't stopped maturing yet. They haven't stopped growing. The nanovirus could change them in ways that isn't instantly fatal. Most kids got the virus, didn't get superpowers, but nothing bad past that. They were rendered immune to the carbon plague if there was another outbreak. But some of them were improved by the magical powers of super science. Those were your three options: death, immunity, or superpowers. If you think this sounds a lot like the Wildcard superhero anthology, you wouldn't be the only person to notice. The carbon plague is brutal. Adults who get it dissolve into a mixture of organic sludge and a carbon compound called hexite. You know that's going to be important later. But the children who get it have a chance of developing nanopowers. This is who you're playing. Despite this being Cybergeneration, you can't actually have cybernetics. That's grown-up stuff. No, really, cyberware does horrible things to kids. Not just in this book, but 2020 details in detail why it's a bad idea to give teenagers cyber weapons, or cyber anything for that matter. There are physical problems, and the humanity loss for people in puberty is through the roof. So no cyberware for you. Instead, you get hexite-evolved powers, which come natural, don't have a humanity point cost, but all of them are quite narrow in scope. When you're building your teenager, you have to pick from a long list of options for your background. Gone are the old roles like solos and nomads. Instead, they've just been renamed and adjusted so you can play as them as teenagers. There are far more teenager roles than there were adult ones, so you can be any kind of teenager you would want from the distant future in 2025. But who are these superpowered Gen Zers that are trying to save the world? Or more likely, the mall? R. Talsorian got a lot right about the future in Cyberpunk, but who would have thought of all the misses in their timeline it would be the death of them all? There's a lot of different types of kids to play, and a lot more were included in the few supplements that were later added. First you had the Arco Runners. They lived in the mega buildings and knew how to get around places they weren't supposed to be. Then came the Beaver Brats, living in the suburbs with their Norman Rockwell-styled normalcy, while being invisible because kids can't be noticed in planned communities. Board punks are the skateboarders. They own every level surface. Eco Raiders run around screaming about saving the environment. In Cyberpunk, where the environment is largely past tense. Face dancers are the kids that use a specific kind of cyberware, breaking the previous rule, that lets them resculpt their face. So apparently cosmetic cyberware is allowed under the no cyber rule. Got it. They can be anybody, and they make it a huge deal to impersonate the most important person they can to see if they can get away with it. Glitter kids are the celebrities of Cybergeneration. The glitter kids never have no money. The glitter kids wear the most expensive clothes. The glitter kids are always at the party. Where the money comes from, heaven only knows. Go-gangers are nomad kids. That's it, just teenage versions of the old class. You'll see that in most of the other roles. Golden kids are the teenaged corpos. Most of them are foreigners because in Cyberpunk 2020, all the money is overseas. And they have tons of it and they know how to use it. Then you have the goths, because this was written in the 90s, so act mopey, listen to The Cure, and be able to recite The Crow from start to finish on command. Easy enough. Guardians are the cop kids protecting the neighborhoods from criminal scum. Mall brats dominate the malls, and they know where to find everything. They're fixers. They are the kid version of fixers. Mega violence is stolen from Clockwork Orange. They like a little bit of the old ultra-violence, and those droogies love going whore showing some old smack. Rads are considered the most dangerous of all the teen gangers, not because they are glowing in the dark or blowing stuff up, but because they're the ones working from the inside. They join the corps or other places of power, and they know how they operate. And more importantly, they know how to break them. Street fighters are this timeline's version of solos. Squats are the street kids. They live where they can and have adapted to live on the streets. Tinker Tots are the techies. Tribals are similar to street gangs, only with a stronger bond to their peers. Vidiots are the medias, bringing truth to the world since all the other old medias are quite dead. So pick your style of teenager, and then the Game Master will pick your superpower. Yes, you don't get to choose your own superpower. And it's not a superpower, it's the result of the carbon plague. And it is a plague. It takes 2 years before people stop dying from it. Turns out that it can lay dormant for an unknown amount of time before activating. And they don't know why. This is part of the reason why the government is rounding up and possibly eliminating all the changed. They fear them. They don't know if you're a plague vector or a carrier. All they know is you have superpowers and they don't. And that's enough for any cyberpunk nation to hunt you down. Don't trust anybody legally able to drink. And that is the one rule people will complain about the most, is the Game Master decides who gets what powers, not the players. It's not meant to be a random thing. There are charts to roll on, but one kind of kid isn't predisposed to develop one power over another. And there is sort of a chart, but it's more of a percentage breakdown of how each type of change is represented. There's more scanners than there are wizards, for example. You can even have no powers at all, but since you learn about your powers as you play, discovering you're the only kid in the group that can't control nano machines to do your bidding, it's a bit of a dick move by the GM. There are 5 starting powers for the teenagers to manifest. 10 men can use the hexite in their body to go all T-1000 on people, creating nano weapons on their arms, grow armor, or if you're trying to impress some Japanese girls, even grow and create tentacles. They are also incredibly resistant to pain, with their pain level stopping somewhere around the ow level. Powers are used as a skill check, and there is usually no power source for them to be spent from, so you can keep whipping those tentacles as long as you pass the necessary checks. One of the only requirements for most cyber evolved is they need food. Lots of food. If they don't get enough, bad things happen. Their bodies can shut down, or if they get lucky, they just lose their powers. Alchemists get to use their cool nano powers to alter physical substances. They can turn coal into diamonds, flash freeze the carbon dioxide into the air into dry ice, take a steel ingot and turn it into a revolver. They can't do this unless they understand what they're working with, so unless the alchemist knows exactly how a revolver works, they can only make a gun-shaped metal brick. Their power takes time as they have to create the assemblers that do the work for them. Even simple changes take a while as they have to recover and rebuild their tools. Scanners read minds. That's their power in a nutshell. Despite their name, they can't make your head explode. Doesn't stop them from trying, though. They can channel their electromagnetic powers into a form of hand taser, but most of their ability is through reading the brainwaves of a target. This gives them no small bonus in combat, as once they have connected with somebody, it's easy to track their intentions. They don't have to touch the target, they can scan it from several meters away. These guys are the most common form of changed, making up almost half their number. Lastly, we have wizards. Cybergeneration doesn't have the net anymore, not as we know it. The government made sure of that. They also cracked down on guns and cyberware as well, unless of course you work for them. Wizards have the ability to interface with the tech by touch, making them quite dangerous for the powers that be. They can generate their own programs in their mind and unleash them with a thought. Their powers only work on electronic devices, but they can affect everything from flashlights to AI. They are the least favored of the changed, according to government agencies. There are additional books for Cybergeneration that expand the role of the teenagers and provides 3 additional powers. These books give the players more reasons to fight the system. Eco-Front tells you about what's left of the wilderness. Media Front gives you new reasons to hate the mainstream press. Virtual Front explains what happened to the net in its current state. There's a few other books, most of them third-party, but they all expand on the world further. Nothing on the same scale as Cyberpunk 2020, but the Carbon Plague is centered on Night City after all. It has a reason to be focused on just a very small portion of the setting. The world in Cybergeneration is very much crapsack, but it is somehow improved from 2020. It's a complete totalitarian state. The government has allowed itself to be bought by the corporations, but at the same time subsumed them into its being. The ISA is in total control. They have seized all the guns, gotten rid of all the cyberware, and reduced the net to just having people sightseeing. And now they're hunting down kids because they're afraid of their powers. It's not a nice place to live, but it is much safer. At least until the government decides that all the things that it's providing for the population wasn't for free, and now everybody's got to go work off their debt. Uncle Sam giveth, Uncle Sam taketh away. All the edge runners of old are gone, with very specific exceptions. If you were played by Mike Pondsmith or one of his friends, you get to be alive. Everybody knows Morgan Blackhand is still kicking. All the other surviving solos helping the kids take on his name so the government doesn't know who the real Blackhand is. Alt is there helping from cyberspace. Bart Moss is in his cyber fridge playing holy hell on government systems when it amuses him. The adults that are left are few in number, but they have all the skills. The style of play is radically different from 2020. The overabundance of guns is no more. If you're not a government agent, you don't get bang-bang sticks. No more street vendors selling plastic bang makers out of the back of their van. No combat zones with people sporting fully automatic weapons. The kids have to rely on their powers and their skills. Connections are more important, stealth is more important, intelligence is key. You don't want to get shot. The bad guys have all the guns and have all the cyber. Remember that. Cybergeneration's layout is pretty good for an R. Talsorian product. It has the equipment laid out and the art almost like it's an advertisement, with examples of the gear being used or shown. The second edition is a better layout, but that's misleading because you're not going to find first edition for sale normally, as second edition is currently sitting on store shelves. That's where I got this copy. Say what you want about RTAL, they know how to keep things in print. I haven't checked the book thoroughly for the typos that normally plague these publications, but I didn't spot any obvious ones either. Cybergeneration is a weird mix between superhero and cyberpunk, and it doesn't really provide much of either. There's only 5 powers in the starting book, there's only 3 more in the supplements. Despite it being in the cyberpunk universe, the game specifically keeps the kids from getting cyberware, except for some very specific exceptions, so we have face dancers. It would have been nice to have more options for nano powers, and more roles for characters to play other than just young versions of the classic classes. We didn't need a half-page section on sex in a game where everybody is playing kids. That's just not a topic needed where the starting age for characters is 12 and caps at 18. Cybergeneration does use the interlock system, which is based on the original Cyberpunk D20 system, and it has smoother and condensed combat mechanics. The game is lighter in tone. It didn't need death mechanics that included a chunky salsa wound level. That was one of the problems with 2020. It was a bit bloated with skills that never got used. It doesn't fix many of the various stats that saw little use like luck or movement, but also took away the easy fixes with the loss of cyberware. And I still found it a better system than Red. That's Cybergeneration. It's $22 on the RTAL website. It's an interesting diversion for players that like that kind of game. Superpowered kids running from an oppressive government is a time-honored science fiction staple. No reason to change that now. But this isn't Cyberpunk 2020. It's its own game with specific rules and a lack of what drew you to the original that spawned it. And this will be the last Welcome to Night City until a new book shows up. But it was nice to revisit the place at least one more time.